All right, well, this is Crash Canon. I'm Chris. This is the first in-person, like, at-home studio thing I've done ever, so we'll see how it goes. I've got a guest here today. Who are you?
Bug Hall.
And tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Oh, man. Well, Catholic since 2013 Easter. And 2013 or 2012, I can't remember. But I was a film and TV actor for my childhood years and through my adult years. I did about 100 film and TV shows. And then I went into writing and producing. I started my own film and TV development company, produced a bunch of stuff, sold shows to Netflix, all that kind of stuff. And then there was a crossover where I was Catholic and then running my company for about 7 years. And there was an incongruity between the two. There was just something not working. And at a certain point, I realized that the career was not compatible with the faith. I still stand by that. I've got friends that are still Catholic and in Hollywood, and we talk, and we're still friends, and we always kind of joke, because I just don't think that industry is compatible with the faith. And so I tried to figure out what to do with my life after that. 30 years in one business, being very successful at it, and right in the middle of an Emmy nomination, and then trying to figure out how to redirect things. At the time, I was reading St. Francis's Omnibus, and I was reading a lot of the Carthusians, and then this weird idea came to me that I wanted to do something kind of radical and extreme, and the idea of lay poverty, some application of lay poverty, devoting my life in a more unique way to our Lord's poverty, and dragging my family along with me. And it's been just unimaginably fruitful.
Do you mind if I ask what a vow of poverty actually looks like?
Yeah, so as of now, I haven't officially taken the vow.
Okay.
So I've been defining it for 4 years. With my old spiritual director, I had kind of run the idea by him. He loved the idea, and he very prudently said, you should define it really well first. All the applications, how it functions, how it doesn't function, right? Figure out what doesn't work, what does work. And then just almost coming up on a year now, there was a big upheaval in our life that kind of encouraged me to finalize the vow. Because as we went through that over this last year, everything worked fine. Like all the principles that I've put into place have worked out, even in the worst possible upheaval we could have had. We never ended up homeless or starving or anything like that. Everything works. So now I'm ready to take the vow. I'll be looking for a bishop who's hopefully willing to see me through that. If not, I'll just take it as a private vow. And it's not super complicated. My relationship with money is just very different than a lot of people's relationship with money. I use money. I don't keep money, and I don't pursue money actively in any consistent way, right? So I don't maintain a means of income. Mm-hmm. I can go and pursue a temporary means of income when there's a financial need that comes up. But once that financial need is met, then I relinquish whatever that means of income is, right? So we don't keep any kind of real savings, but part of that process is radically chipping away at the overhead. Mm-hmm. So, the lowest we've gotten to, this upheaval's been a little weird, but the lowest we've gotten to, we've gotten our overhead down to like $350 a month. And so part of my life, because I'm a very free man, I donate a lot of my time to helping people. The little old lady at the parish whose toilet is broken, go on YouTube, figure out how to fix a toilet, and I go fix her toilet. Someone had some gutters and they were literally crying, going in the house, and I said, I'll just come clean your gutters for you. And so I do that stuff without any thought towards payment, without any request for payment, and I make it very clear that that's the intention. I'm just here to help. And then very often someone will put $20 in my hand or $100 in my hand and say, no, please take this. And I don't get weird about it. No, I'm not going to take it. I'll say no once, and then I'll take it. Just that little bit has fulfilled our small overhead. And when we finally get settled in Arkansas on our new farm that I'll be building, our overhead actually will be I think $420 a year, plus a little gas money to get to Mass.
That makes sense. It is funny that you say that you're free because you don't have to live within the confines of what society defines as, liberty or freedom, whatever society defines.
Right.
You don't actually need a lot of the things that society thinks you need, right?
You really don't. It hurts at first.
I bet.
There's a lot of stuff that you think there's just no way we can go without this. And then you rip it out, and it's fun. It's me and my wife have commented on how fast you forget about the thing, So we've cut everything. We have our phone bill, and that's really it. And we're about to combine phones, which is her phone broke, and so we had to combine phones for about a month. I couldn't get her a phone, and we loved it. Having a shared phone was amazing because neither of us had an inclination to utilize the phone other than just like bare minimum needs. Mm-hmm. It just kind of sat in a community spot, and then we just knew it was there, and I could use it if I needed to, and she could. So we're going to go back to that model. That was kind of an accidental test run, and we loved it. So that'll cut down on the phone too. But yeah, no internet, no TV, no nothing. Really nothing.
It makes me think of I see couples online who combine their Facebook accounts.
Right.
Because social media inherently puts you in an independent spot.
Right.
Separate. Like people always talk, you don't have separate bank accounts in a marriage, right?
Right. Yeah.
But in reality, you have separate accounts for a lot of things.
Right.
A lot of people do, right? Because that's just how social media seems to work these days.
Right. Well, it's, because a lot of people, especially nowadays, most people are going into marriages with all their social media accounts already set up. My wife, just on her own, she was as radical as I was, or at least her inclinations towards being radical were always kind of there. And she jokes about how she could have gone one way or another just depending on who she married. But she nuked all her social media when we got married. She was just like, I just don't want it. I don't want people reaching out to me.
Yeah.
And plus, partially me being a public figure.
Yeah.
There was already that happening,
Sure.
just a little bit. Like, hey, is your husband so-and-so? Are you? Because there was like news articles about me getting married and whatnot. So she nuked everything, and she loves it. And I'm pretty much nuking everything as well. Well, I got nuked off Twitter or off Instagram, so they did that for me.
It's funny how things work like that, right?
Yeah.
So, a lot of people know you from your movie in the 90s.
Yeah. Yeah, The Little Rascals was my first.
A little bit more hair on your face now than back.
Yep, a little bit more hair. It moved from up here down to here. Yeah, that was my first film. I wasn't an actor. I was just a normal kid going to school in Texas, and they had a big open call for that. So that was that's very rare in Hollywood.
Like
that's not something that's normally done. But Spielberg, I think wisely, recognized that the charm of the original Little Rascals, the old black and white Our Gang, the charm of it was that those were just normal kids. And that show, it was very charming, and he wanted to replicate that. So he did a big open call and insisted on not hiring actors. And so, yeah, they auditioned 10,000 kids for Alfalfa around the country.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
I can't imagine trying to pick the one person out from 10,000 kids all applying for the same, auditioning for the same thing.
Yeah, my life would have been very different if that hadn't, because I wasn't interested in acting. I wasn't pursuing it. it's not like if I had not gotten that, I would have just gone out and tried to get something else. I
Right.
was just like, oh, back to my normal life.
Yeah, it's kind of like the kids who aren't really having a career go to American Idol audition and then they go back to normal life.
Right, exactly.
It's not exactly the same thing. But
Yeah,
you know what I
no,
mean.
very similar. Yeah.
And then at some point you're in Hollywood, you have lots of things going on, and you discover your Catholic faith.
Yep.
Because you didn't have any type of faith growing up.
No, I didn't. I wasn't raised with any religion at all. It was growing up in Hollywood, especially. It's very strange. Religion to me was just something on TV.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to explain how foreign the concept was to me. And now, of course, I had the inclination, like everybody does, because it's built into our human nature. You know, I would be down and out and depressed about something, or have that teen angst that was going on, and I would go at 3 o'clock in the morning or something and climb the roof of a building in the mountains and sit up there and, you know, cry out to God, you know, right? Like you have that inclination in you. And then you wake up the next day and you shake it off as some silly, I must have lost my mind last night. Who was I talking to? I think back on some of those moments, though. How much grace God gave me and then continued to give me, you know. But, I walked into a private conference with a Catholic priest. I had never seen a Catholic priest in person. And here's this guy in, you know, full cassock with 33 buttons. And I remember thinking it was really bizarre. I really just thought that those existed in movies. It's so weird to be standing in front of a guy dressed this way, right? It's interesting because it commands actually a certain authority and presence. I was talking to an actor friend of mine after my conversion, because I still worked for a few years, you know, and C. Thomas Howell, I was working with him on this goofy little indie film, and he was actually playing a priest. It was like in this nightmare scene, of course, because movies, you know. And he put on the priest clothes, and he actually was like, "Well, you're Catholic now, right? Bro, show me how to do the blessing. Like, how do I do my hands, you know, for this scene?" And so I like showed him, you know, what the blessing hand looks like. And we wrapped up, it was a night shoot. We wrapped up and we were sitting at Denny's, me and him, just catching up because we hadn't seen each other in a couple of years. And he made the observation. He said, "Man, it's crazy, Bug, because, you know, I put on that outfit. I look at myself in the mirror." He said, "And, you know, you've got the crucifix there." He said, "The imagery of the Catholic religion is so powerful. It's almost like it has meaning that's just built in, that's not made up." He didn't know how to word it. But what he was trying to say was there's an intrinsic truth that we all recognize. And I just kind of smiled and was like, "Well, yeah, Tommy, that's true. Yeah.
Objectively.
It's objectively true." But, so I met this priest, and there was this conference, and I've told this story 1,000 times, but, you know, in short, by the end of the night, I went from 0 to Catholic. You know, it just kind of struck me as true. And within a couple months, Easter was coming up. And within a couple months, I was baptized and confirmed and received First Communion.
You don't strike me as somebody that doesn't take things seriously.
Yeah, I'm on or off. You know, I have an on switch and an off switch, and once that on switch is on, it's on. You know?
Yeah, it's like once you find something you're committed to, whether it's your belief or your job or whatever, you really go right into it.
Yep. Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you want to talk about it now, but when you met your wife and whatnot.
Yeah.
That was pretty serious right there, huh?
Yeah. I was at, so the group of guys who had this priest over for a conference, I had become friends with them. It's the guys that made Sound of Freedom and the Cabrini movie. So I was friends with them out in LA, and we're still friends. They're good guys. And it was Eduardo's birthday, and he wanted to have like a philosophy conference that his business partner used to do, these little philosophy conferences. And he wanted to have a philosophy conference for his birthday. And so they were having that. and it was at another friend's house, and I was just kind of sitting there, and I had been out of town for a while because after my conversion, I went to Texas to spend time with my family. I really wanted to get to know my family better. I feel like, the sign of a real radical conversion is always the desire to rebuild bridges with our familial relationships.
Oh, absolutely.
My stepfather who raised me, I just had this crazy urge. I was like, I just want to be with them. I want to know them real well. I want to be with them. And so I was in Texas for like 9 months working on a ranch with my brother just to hang out with them, just to be with them. And so I had just got back to LA 2 days before Eduardo's birthday. And so, when you separate yourself from a friends group and then you come back, there's new people.
Yeah.
And so I saw this young woman, and I was thinking like, oh, she must be new in the group. I don't know who she is. But the second I saw her, I remember thinking, I'm going to marry her. That's the woman I'm going to marry. I was sure of it. And I told my friend that. I said, who's this new girl? Is she new in the group? He said, actually, I don't know. This is her first day here. Someone invited her, some friend of a friend, and she's just here. And I was like, well, I'm going to marry her. And then ironically, she was roommates with this other young woman. And when I told my friend that, he said, well, I'm going to marry her friend. And he did.
Did he really?
Yeah, he married her friend. And so that was it. And it was a crazy courtship. I had to learn the courtship principles from my spiritual director, and trying to apply the courtship principles in a world that doesn't really condone courtship. They see courtship as something that's antiquated. Trying to do that was very difficult. But we maintained them pretty strictly. And then 6 months in, she decided she's called to the religious life. So I dropped her off at a cloister out in the desert with some nuns out there, and we didn't see each other for 9 months. I went back to Texas because I didn't want to precipitate her, her judgment, during her discernment.
And so, she wasn't Catholic before you guys got started courting, right?
That's right. Well, she was raised like kind of that nominal social Catholic,
Sure.
Catholic school.
But she had fallen away from it.
Yeah, fallen away from it. And then the day she graduated from high school, she went out to LA at first thinking that she wanted to be in the film business. She threw that out real quick and then was just kind of just going to the beach and enjoying living in Los Angeles. She was working at an old folks home, taking care of Alzheimer's patients. And and when I met her, within a week, I had her back in confession and going back to mass. We were all going to daily mass together at the time. So, so she wanted to be a nun, or she thought she was called to be a nun. So I dropped her off. 9 months later, I was up in Vermont in a writer's room with these Oscar-winning writers, and we're talking about this project, and we're working through stuff. And I go out to have a cigarette, and when I went out to have a cigarette, my phone rings, and it's her. And she said, hey, I know it's been a long time, 9 months, but I just decided I'm called to the married life. And so I felt like that I should at least call you and tell you. I said, okay, I'll see you tomorrow. I went back in the room and said, hey, who's going to take me to the airport? Someone took me to the airport. I got on a plane, went back, and we picked up our courtship, and I didn't want to miss my window, so I proposed within like a few weeks, I think. Yeah, she's awesome. I can't imagine any other woman whose husband could come home, after, a 30-year career, quitting a 30-year career, just had this relapse that just shook up his life. And then all of a sudden he comes home and says, so I finally figured out what we're doing, honey. It's a vow of poverty. And she just goes, okay. Didn't even bat an eye. She was okay.
Clearly she trusts your leadership in the marriage.
Yeah, we've that was, I talked to the young guys about this, docility was really that was the jewel in her crown that I saw. Even in that first time that I saw her, I didn't remember what she looked like. I wasn't attracted to her exterior appearance. I just remember that she asked this question during that little philosophy conference. She raised her hand and asked a question. And I remember thinking that she was more modestly dressed than I was used to seeing women dress. So that was attractive. But secondly, the question she asked, I can't remember what it was. I just remember that it was an expression of docility. It was an expression of genuinely seeking truth in what was being said without any hostility, without that kind of normal pushback that you hear from people when they're being told things that are contrary to their life, right? And I remember that it was just so beautiful. There was this docility. And that was what I pursued, was that docility. I think, I think it's the way to go, finding a gem of a docile wife. And then you have to earn that though too, because you have to, I've obviously made lots of mistakes, but I try to always remember the great responsibility behind that, that I have to uphold.
And now as a father, you have daughters, and you have to make sure that whatever path they're going down, they're going to find a man that'll treat them the right way,
right,
and bring them to the faith. And
yeah,
I know we had a long conversation about that the other day.
It's funny because children believe what you teach them to believe,
right?
And we live in this weird time where we're afraid. A lot of people, at least, are afraid to really build that education into them. And so, like, my children are actually really happy and excited and joyful when they think about the few that have expressed that they want to get married. My eldest, there's no going back. She's starting her own convent. She wants to start her own order. Like, that hasn't changed since she was 4. But my second one down, she's pretty sure I want to get married. But she always asks me the same thing, and she's excited about it. She says, "Daddy, you're going to help me find a husband that wants to live the kind of life that we live, right?" And, which it's always this beautiful thing because it's an expression of how much she loves our life. And my kids are aware that we live a slightly different kind of lifestyle than most people. They're aware of it, and they genuinely love it. And I always tell her, of course, I'm going to help you find the best husband for you because that's my job, And she says, I know you will, Daddy. And I think that's a beautiful thing. I think that's the way it always used to be.
Right.
Because fathers that love their daughters know their daughters really well. And at that marriage age, I would venture to say, even at the consternation of society, that a father that loves his daughter at that age knows her better than she knows herself.
Oh yeah.
Because that's a difficult age at any time. And so, yeah, I think it's such a beautiful tradition that the father was much more integrally involved in that process, and saying, hey, no, this kid has to court, Daddy, so-and-so has to court me. No, he's not right for you. Y'all aren't going to be happy. Well, what's nice too, though, is you do that early.
Yeah.
You don't let the emotions foment, and then there's but we're in love. You can avoid all of that by following proper principles. So and so wants to court me. I don't think y'all are well suited to, wait, someone better will look for you. And that's the way it was done forever. And then she makes the decision, obviously. But
at the end of the day.
But you're guiding her along, and you can put your foot down and go, I don't think this is right. And now, granted, there's always going to be abuse in any setting, right? So you're going to have fathers that abuse that authority. You can look back in history and be like, what about these tyrannical fathers that would never let their who comes to mind now? Richard the Lionheart. He was like notoriously weird about his daughters not getting married. You know what I mean? And wouldn't let him marry anyone. Like that exists.
Yeah.
But abuse does not negate use, which means if a principle is true, just because someone abuses that principle doesn't mean that you throw the principle out.
Oh yeah. You can't, just because one bad thing happens, right, following that principle does not mean the principle itself is bad. You got vice and virtue; they're two sides of the same coin, right?
Yeah. It's a beautiful thing, though. I look forward to it. There was a point when my second daughter started talking about marriage where I was like, oh man, it would have been cool if they were all nuns. Because my first one was so weird how quickly she was like, I'm going to be a nun. I'm starting my own order. And then my second one went along for a while because she's the little sister. And I thought it was neat, though, after I thought about it, that she changed her mind. I think that's a good sign of how those calls and those graces work. Because when she changed her mind, it was really reasonable. She just kind of said, I'm not sure that I want to be a nun. I think marriage is what I want to do. And they're very young, but they're already thinking that way because we just talk about that. We just talk about real life so early
Yeah.
that it's all just normal. And I feel like nowadays nobody talks about anything. So you've got these kids that are 20 and they're like, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. Bro, my kids are 7 and they're 20 years ahead of you. They've already made up their minds about how they want to live and what they're going to do. They're drawing up. My daughter's drawing up her house that she's going to try to make her husband build for her.
Well, it not only does it show a good fatherhood, but if the daughter wants to be married and have children, it shows that your wife,
Right,
that she respects her as a mother.
Yeah.
Because she wouldn't want to be a mother if she thought her mother's life was terrible.
Right. Yeah. No, it's a good point. Yeah, we our society is very strange, right? Because there's the excess and the defect predominantly. That middle ground is almost non-existent in terms of the kind of respect and love that's due to a wife. So you've either got that disordered marriage as an image. It's like the Homer Simpson thing, right, where the wife is just kind of the smart brains and the husband's stupid, and women are just the ruling class. Or in that kind of disordered red pill world, you've got the more tyrannical man approach, right?
And they breed each other. And the red pill thing is breeding the feminists.
Oh yeah, the further this goes, the further that goes.
It just spreads it all out.
Mm-hmm.
And then the normal life in the middle,
right,
like what you're living, I don't know if you call it normal necessarily, not normal for society.
What's funny is I think my life is more normal than most people's lives.
It's more normal for the history of mankind.
Yeah, I was talking to this priest, our new priest down in Arkansas, and I could tell he was kind of feeling me out. So what's the poverty thing? What are you doing? Who are you? And he didn't know anything about me. And it was funny because as I was explaining it to him, and I've always been aware of this, I just don't explain it this way. But as I was explaining it to him, he goes, "Oh, so you're just living how basically everyone lived up until a couple hundred years ago." And I was
the
like,
Industrial Revolution.
Yeah,
right?
I was like, "Bingo! That's it, Father." He goes, "Oh, okay, cool."
Yeah, I mean, the idea of everybody lived kind of a life of poverty,
right,
300, 400, 500 years ago.
Yeah,
it wasn't because only some people had money and power, and everybody else was living.
Yeah, we had a well-designed class system. It was a very natural class system. It wasn't like the class system in India, right? Where that's a different model. But yeah, the feudal class system was really nice. I do think that there needs to be a class in society that is a ruling class, and I do think that ruling class needs a pretty decent wide berth in terms of financials and resources. I once read, I can't remember where, it was the first time it clicked why that class has the resources they have, why it's appropriate for them to have the resources. And it was simply this: that class, the ruling class, there's only a few times a year that they're actually needed to make. Now they're well educated, they're well trained for their state in life, and then there's only a few times a year that they need to make a massive decision.
Yeah.
A huge societal shifting kind of decision. And the stress and burden of resource management prevents people from being able to make real clear-minded decisions.
Yeah.
Right? And so the peasant never had to make a decision like that. They actually, in a way, had less of a burden in their life because they got to just live through the seasons. The rains and the sunshine really determined their choices day to day. Whereas that ruling class, they without that burden, that stress, they were able to be clear-minded enough. Even if it was just that one decision a year that mattered, they could make it clear-minded. And they were designed. Their education was designed for that purpose. It is a beautiful thing to be trained in your state. Like my boy, my son, he's going to be trained for his state in life. He's going to be trained to know this is who and what you are. You can reject that, but the reality is to reject your state in life is always a defect of some sort.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's always a defect of some sort. Now we live in this world where, like, you're almost praised if your father wants you to be a doctor. Let's say you come from a family of doctors and you want to throw that away. No, I want to play guitar in a band. I don't want to be a doctor.
That's the Disney story.
It's the Disney story, and you're praised for it. But it's like, man, you came from 5 generations of doctors. You could have been a great doctor. You could have done a lot of good in that state. And that was what you were clearly called to, because it was those generations behind you. And grace builds on nature, right? So my boy's going to be trained in that. Your job is to replace me someday. You're going to take care of your mother. You're going to take care of your sisters. All my resources will become your resources. The only exception, of course, being, if he's really wants to be a priest, then he's going to have to figure that out. But it'll still be his duty to figure out how to take care of everybody else. How to manage those resources, either who to hand them off to. Maybe one of my daughters has a husband that's well suited to that. Who knows? But it'll be his duty to do that.
Yeah, and I think that is important because growing up in a family that does something,
right.
This is what you do.
Right.
You're trained from a young age that, like, my boys will know how to take care of chickens.
Yep.
Like, it's not like it's crazy or a lot of responsibility, but they'll know how to do it.
Right.
Because I had to stumble through and figure it out, and now they get to watch me do it and learn how to do it, and then if they want to have chickens growing up, they'll know what they're doing.
Yep.
And I think it is sad when a father does not teach or pass down skills to their sons, because you're not equipping them for the future that way.
Yeah.
Or if you ship them off to college and just like, see ya, figure it out yourself. That is what society's been putting on you, but that's not what's good for your children.
Yeah. No, it's not. And that's why we've lost everything.
Yeah.
We've lost just basic animal husbandry has been lost. Basic skills have all been lost. Most men today, most young men, let's say the Gen Z or whatever, can't change a tire, nobody taught them anything. The last farm that I was on up here before we moved to Arkansas, there was a young man there that, it was almost like having a really old son. Like he didn't know how to hold tools, so it was like square one. And it's a strange thing. But it's very common today.
It is.
It's very common. I think it's partially because society is so inundated with leisure and entertainment. I made this observation. I haven't seen it anywhere else, but when I was deciding what to do with my life, the farming was actually an answer to the poverty, right? So like the homesteading and all of that, that wasn't the motive for me. The motive was the poverty. And then I thought, well, how can I make this poverty idea work? Oh, well, if I'm producing most of my family's needs off my own land, well, then my overhead comes way down, right?
Yeah.
But an observation I made was that there used to be this time where it was just built into the nature of things that the young children, especially the young boys, were just always with their father.
Yeah.
Right. From a very early age, they were with him, just seeing him exercise his virtue. And then their leisure time was all kind of earned together. In the way we've built society now, this 9-to-5 job, young boys only see their father in his leisure time.
Yep.
They don't see him exercising the virtue of his labor. So, and when father gets home, I've had jobs. Jobs are hard, right? When you get home, you don't want to go and like, okay, boy, I'm going to teach you how to paint the house.
Yeah.
You want to turn the TV on. You want to relax. Whatever your version of leisure is, that's what you want to do. And so that's a big part, I think, of the breakdown, is that when that 9-to-5 was created, the family started just disintegrating.
I think the Industrial Revolution like just on its own bred women who were discontent, and it led to feminism because women felt like they were being mistreated, being at home all day with the children.
Yep. Yeah.
And then and then you're like you said, now your wife is not only not seeing what you do at your job, your kids aren't seeing what you're doing at your job. All they see is the leisure time.
Yeah. And what's super bizarre is you can trace the Industrial Revolution back to King Henry VIII.
Yeah.
So the largest redistribution of wealth in the history of the world was King Henry VIII stealing all the Catholic lands in England.
Oh yeah.
When he stole all the Catholic lands, and of course he was heavily in debt, so he had to give all those Catholic lands away to various lords that he was indebted to. But what's really interesting is, what was his big sin? It was a disordered family.
Yep.
Right? It was, murdering. How many wives did he murder? Couldn't have kids. Wanted to divorce. He was an embodiment of the destruction of the family. His actions accidentally brought about the Industrial Revolution, because as soon as you had that consolidation of wealth, that's actually what fueled the first steps in the Industrial Revolution. You suddenly had this large pool of wealth in order to go and experiment with these machines and do these different things. And you had these huge corporations now for the first time that were way bigger than any business had ever been able to reach. And boom, the Industrial Revolution just bursts forth. And it's so bizarre to me that, I guess it's poetic that destruction of family being the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, and then also begetting that on the other side.
Oh, absolutely. And then you look at the encyclicals all the popes are putting out, and they're talking about modernism in the 1800s. And who thinks of modernism in the 1800s?
Yeah. Yeah. I just saw recently someone brought up, they said, well, it's really strange because the pope after pope after pope kept warning us about modernism. And then all of a sudden, not a single breath is breathed about modernism since Vatican II. Where did all the modernists go? Did they all disappear? How come we're not getting warnings about it anymore?
Well, I think it gets worse though, doesn't it? Because so you got to get down to. Actually, I think the problem is you wind up seeing all the little things and not the forest. You don't see the trees, you see the forest. And you stop seeing all the little creeping issues that slowly grow and snowball into something you can't control anymore.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of the sad thing about not having a ruling class.
Yeah.
Because we don't have a ruling class, not in the traditional sense. But that ruling class was supposed to be the foresight that guarded Western society, right? It was supposed to be men. And what people don't understand about that old way is that most of the people who were in that ruling class, they deep in their bones, they understood the responsibility that they were going to be judged. Just like on the ecclesial side of things, like a bishop doesn't really want to be a bishop because he knows like his judgment's going to be way harsher.
Oh yeah.
Right? He's going to be judged for everything that happens in his diocese. And the ruling class always understood that too. They were going to face God and they were going to answer for everything. Yeah. And so they were deeply motivated to do right. And even though we have those abuses, over the years, the vast majority of them were so just beautifully benevolent. And they had that foresight. That was their job, was to go, wait a minute, what's going to happen if this happens and then this happens and then this happens? Well, hey, 200 years from now, I could foresee this leading to the destruction of the family. No, let's put a stopgap on corporate law. Let's say corporations are not afforded the dignity of personhood, because that's super bizarre.
That is really weird.
Let's not allow that. I'm just going to say we're not allowing it. And you would have one guy that could just do that. That could just look at it logically and go, no, a corporation can't sue something. That's what persons do.
I think the biggest issue with everybody getting a say in how the government runs is inevitably you're going to consistently creep the rules out. Yeah. It doesn't come back in. You have to have one person with a solidified level of power,
right,
in order to reel things in.
Right. Well, and that's, again, in that old way, even if things did decline a bit, you would always inevitably get a strong leader that could correct course.
Yeah.
Because he generally, they were beholden to social norms and things like that, but they had a lot more power. Whereas now nobody really has any power. I mean, we all joke about the fact that politicians promise all these things and they're just liars. But the reality is, a lot of them
they can't do it.
They just can't do it. It's not possible. It also
they don't have the power to do it, and they don't have the people behind them to do it.
Right. It's just that it's almost this beast that is this self-generating beast that no one can slay. We need some kind of political version of St. George. But yeah, I mean it's just a bizarre thing. It also leads to extreme nearsightedness, right? Because politicians know they're only going to be politicians for a certain amount of time.
It's horrible for society.
Right. It's horrible for society.
You don't build Gothic cathedrals in short-term thinking society.
That's it. And everything, with democracy, everything's short-term.
It is.
Everything is, well, I got to do this to get elected again. I got to do this to get elected again. And nobody wants to build something that's going to take 400 years to build.
No. Even no matter what it glorifies, nobody wants to spend that time, the energy. They don't want them to never see the fruits of their labor. It's like the whole idea of planting a tree. You know that tree, if you plant it when you're very young, you might see the finality of it.
Yeah.
But for the most part, you plant a tree for the next generation, the next owner, the next person who's going to be there.
Yeah. Stewardship of the land is like that. I've fallen so in love with stewardship of land. Again, that's just a secondary effect of the poverty principles. I didn't set out to like love the principles of stewardship, but it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful to be in charge of something that you're really not going to see. I'm building a food forest on the new farm. Once we get the livestock is always first. I always tell people, I'm a meat eater. Like, get your livestock situation figured out. Get your pasture cleared, whatever you got to do. And then you start working towards annual crops, perennial crops. We're more fruit. If we're not eating meat, it's more fruit than vegetables. So after the animals, we're going to build this beautiful food forest, right? Which is just kind of a wild orchard. It's like Willy Wonka. Everything's edible, but it's a forest.
Yeah.
Now, the reality is, I'm 40 years old. I'm starting this farm at 40 years old. And I'm not going to see these trees really producing in abundance.
Right.
I'm going to build this food forest, and it's going to be something that my family enjoys, way into the future. But I'm not, I'll get to pick a couple in that first phase of planting. 10 years from now, I'll get to pluck a couple things off the tree and eat them. But I'm not going to see much of that. It's a beautiful thing. Or you plant shade trees. Well, the house is going here. We need some southern shade trees. I'm going to plant those. I'm not going to ever sit in the shade of those trees, But when you have that 200-year hat on and the land changes you. It changes you without even trying, without reading a bunch of philosophy or whatever. You just turn into that 200-year man, someone that I'm going to build a chapel. I might not finish the chapel. It's going to be a beautiful 200-seat, mini Gothic style cathedral with flying buttresses, and I'm going to go nuts. I might not see it finished. I'll build it in my spare time over the years, and now I do project. We're going to have it done in 3 to 5 years, and we've got retired priests that are already chomping at the bit to come and stay, but that might not be the case. Yeah. I don't know what the world's going to bring and what my life's going to bring. I might just never see it finished. My boy might finish it, when he's 30. My dad started this chapel, and now here it is. It'd be nice if we were all like Noah. What was he, 900 years old? Yeah. I remember the first time I realized, because you glaze over a lot of scriptural details, when you're first learning. When I realized that he built the ark for 150 years.
That's a long time.
I was like, man, could you imagine devoting 150 years to building just one thing?
Well, and if he lived to be 600 or 900, that's like a quarter of his life.
Right.
It'd be like 25 years. You spent 25 years doing something, right?
Yep.
A long time.
That's wild. Yeah.
I do think that the more people spend time working land, working farming, instinctually we just know eventually we develop a habit of knowing what to do. I mean,
Yeah.
when the people that lived here, the Native American, whatever you want to call them, they knew to take care of the forests.
Right.
You build that out of habit, out of living on the land and doing that.
Yeah.
And then the preservationists come in. They're like, no, you can't do that. And then now we have forest fires all over the country, and we're not maintaining the forests.
Yep.
I think it's just instinctual. You take care of the land. You know what you're doing. God puts that in us.
Yep.
And the longer you do it, the better you get at it.
And what's really bizarre is I've spent time learning stuff.
Sure.
But what's really bizarre is your instincts just start to get better.
Yeah.
You just start to have these instincts. I should do this. I should do that. Like no one told me. We've got all these like creeping vines. I don't even know what kind of vines they are, but it's not hard to look and go, man, the trees that are the worst with these vines are all dying.
Yeah.
And these vines are all over the place. Oh, you know what? I should be either burning this stuff out, or I keep little shear like clippers with me. I just keep them on me. And anytime I see them now, I just snip. I'm walking here, I'm walking there. And if I see them, I just snip them, and that just over time, that weeds out these trees getting choked out by the vines. But then at the same time, you've got to go in there and you've got to clear space for sunlight to come through and everything else. Otherwise, everything dies. And the conservationists, it's so bizarre that they can't figure that out.
They can't figure it out.
Like, don't chop down a single tree.
And they can't figure out how to increase population size. I was reading, I don't know if you've ever read Michael Crichton's books, Jurassic Park and all that. He did one called State of Fear.
Right.
And it's literally about like the conservationist alarmism. It's like the idea that you can save the environment by not touching it. No, we've been saving the environment by interacting with it the entire time we've been on this planet.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's absolutely true. Man has been the steward of this planet since Adam was in the garden. We've always been the stewards, and
no other creature on this planet can do it.
Yep. And it's really bizarre that people don't see that.
They don't.
But like if you just leave it alone, it gets worse.
It does.
It degenerates. The land that we just ended up on, we've got 80 acres down in Arkansas, and the previous homeowner, he wanted some hunting land, and he didn't really do much except drive out there every once in a while and hunt, and it's dilapidated. I mean, it's a really poor. Now it has lots of resources. There's plenty of stone and timber for me to build my house, and that's all great. But I mean, if you look at the forest areas around there that are managed well, there's more life. It's more vibrant. Whereas this thing is just like trees are falling over and they're all rotted out. Tons of trees have heart rot, and because it's just mangled and it's a mess. Man's always been the steward of Earth. And of course, now the conservationists are all naturalist stuff. So that's the last thing that they want to recognize, is that man has always been the steward, because their view of history is one where man's an invasive species.
Yeah.
And nature was some kind of pristine, beautiful thing, and then man came in and kind of invaded.
Well, they also don't want you to touch like pagan societies, like what's going on with North Staten Island.
Right.
They want to just leave them in the darkness of what they're living. They don't want to touch that island. They don't want to give them anything that we've earned over or whatever you want to call it.
Right. Yeah. Chesterton has a great observation about that, about how the, those like really, really primitive tribes, and now we have that whole principle of like, don't contact the primitive tribes, leave them alone. That's how they've always lived. Let them live that way. Chesterton's like, there's no reason to think that that's how they've always lived.
Right.
It's perfectly reasonable to think that they were part of some higher society at some point.
They lost contact.
And they lost contact and degenerated, rather than that's just how
they shipwrecked there.
Right. Exactly.
And they were forced to live on that land, which was not good for what they were used to.
Right.
I mean, think about the movie. I mean, I know this is a terrible example. It's a Disney movie, but Tarzan. Right. What happens to Tarzan?
Right.
He's raised by parents from a European society.
Yep.
Then they die. and then he grows up in the jungle. And
Yep.
of course, you grow up in the jungle, you're going to live by the jungle.
Yep. Boy, we're seeing that now. I mean, you really are very much a product of your environment. Our society has gotten so strange so fast. I mean, just general politeness, I have this place in Fort Worth. Every time I'm there, this is where I'm from, called the Water Gardens. And in my opinion, it's one of the most spectacular landmarks in the entire United States. And it's just nestled in the middle of Fort Worth. It's not even real popular. It's magnificent though. And I've always gone there. I used to go pray my rosaries there when I was living there. I love the Water Gardens. And all of a sudden, it's just like, I went there with my kids and I was trying to take them down these kind of treacherous. That's one of the reasons it's so amazing, is because it's one of the last really treacherous places you can go. Like, you can genuinely just die. There's these walk paths where if you slip off, you're just going to die.
That's crazy.
And it's all man-made, but it's made to look like this jungle environment with waterfalls and all this. And I'm bringing my kids, and there's these people just shoving and pushing each other, and it's like, and when I was a kid, people used to just naturally get out of the way, right? Like, okay, someone's coming up, I should step to the side now. There was this natural rhythm of politeness, and it's just gone. I could easily see, obviously I love stories. I grew up with stories. Story theory was my specialty. I love dystopian and apocalyptic stories, especially. It was actually St. Thomas More that coined the phrase utopia.
Yeah, that was his book, right?
Yeah, he wrote a book called Utopia. He made that word up. So when we think about dystopias, that word, it's just generated from St. Thomas More's word that he made up. But I love that stuff, and I could easily see a version of history if everything's just left alone, right? Like, let's just pretend our society's just left alone for 500 years. I could easily see us being an absolutely just savage, wild beast of a society, like living in mud huts. I mean, we're degenerating so fast.
It's funny, I never thought, like, how could you have pagan idols that people actually worship?
Right.
But I have discovered there's a community on Reddit that they put a whale statue in the middle of this, like, suburb somewhere, and people actually go and venerate this whale as a joke. But
right.
Over time, a joke becomes reality,
Yeah.
and people will just start believing this whale has some kind of power.
It's funny because I just mentioned Chesterton. Chesterton makes that exact same observation about how a lot of the pagan idol worship, was almost like an inside joke.
Yeah,
you're not quite sure if they ever truly believed. It was more like this tongue-in-cheek joke that society just sort of accepted. And then you have these sort of darker undercurrents, right? The real demonic version of that pagan worship, where they're actually
sacrificing babies.
They're sacrificing babies, and they're once they realize there's a power they can gain, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's I could see it easily. I mean, I could see. I mean, we're already idol worshippers in so many different ways in this society. I could easily see it degenerating to just really nuts and bolts, pagan idols. What that would end up looking like, who knows? I mean, there's a whole movement right now online. There's like this whole Germanic, tribal, pagan movement, where they're very adamant that it was Christianity that sent Western man in the wrong direction,
and they're wrong,
and that Western man was doing a lot better when he was, a pagan worshiper. Now, I don't think any of them really believe in the German pagan gods.
No,
but they're all very adamant. Well, my, so and so is greater than your Christian God, and it's like, how bizarre that we're in this place where these people are just really playing this game. And 2 generations later, 3 generations later, it wouldn't be hard for that to just be fully resurrected and operating as if it were reality.
Yeah, we're already in a place where, even if not in name, they're bringing back the vices of the pagan gods.
Yep.
Just flat out.
Yeah.
You've got people that are making themselves into eunuchs effectively.
Yep.
And dressing like what they're not.
Right. Yeah. And what's really bizarre is, Christianity came into this pagan world. Now the paganism that's being resurrected is a response to, at least a perceived response to, Christianity. Now, what they're really responding to is heretical Christianity.
Yeah.
Right? What they're really responding to when they say, well, Christianity is too soft, there's no masculinity in it. Okay, you're talking about evangelicals, you're talking about, and let's face it, let's call it the face of even Catholicism right now, right? Is this very soft, limp-wristed kind of Christianity, right? Because, ironically, because it is trying to play nice with the Protestants.
Yeah.
And so it turned into this emasculated thing, right? Whereas, in generations gone by, Christianity was as masculine as it gets. It was real men living out hard lives, right? Suffering, choosing to suffer for our beloved. And then Protestantism really created this soft, it's a soft, watered down Christianity. And then, unfortunately, after Vatican II, the Church really, and I don't make any observations about what intentions were, but the Church was seeking to bridge
the gap,
and rather than what it's always done, which is simply draw in who wants to come in, it went out pursuing,
kind of separate from the world, because
right.
The world is going to lead you astray,
right? And the world that when the Church, Vatican II, when it said it was trying to figure out how to go out to meet the world had become a Protestant world.
It did.
That's what it had become. It was a Protestant world. It was no longer a Christian, a Catholic world. Protestantism is wildly different in its social aspect. It's wildly different. And the more you dig down into it, it's a lot of people are fond of saying, well, we got more similarities than we do. You might be able to make that argument if you're just kind of lining up theologies. You might be able to say, there's more similarities than differences. But when you break those down and how they come out socially, because all religion comes out socially.
It does.
Right? The social reflects whatever that is. Once it filters through and comes out socially, it creates a completely different society.
Protestantism is inherently susceptible to the what is it called? The prosperity gospel.
Right.
It's all because they separate the sacrifice, they separate the suffering, because suffering is a part of Christianity, and if you take that away, you're not looking at the same Christianity we started with.
That's right. Yeah. There's and ironically, there's not even any worship in the strict sense.
No, or they're worshiping the words of the minister. I'm not saying necessarily the minister,
right?
But the words of the minister get, like, how many times do I hear a quote from, like, they'll be like, oh, but that's not in the Bible, so I don't listen to it. But then they listen to Billy Graham,
right?
And I'm like, well, how is that any different than?
Yeah,
it's so fun because, like, you quote the early church fathers and they're like quoting Billy Graham. It's like,
yeah,
I didn't realize Billy Graham had such a close relationship with the early church. But okay, all right.
Well, he's got 3 private jets, so he's closer to God than the rest of us.
I think you're thinking of Kenneth Copeland and those guys. I don't want to specifically call out people, but he does have a bunch of jets. Kenneth Copeland does.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a really famous interview with him where he's just like, "Why I can't ride on the same plane as the gay people or something, something like that." I don't know. It's funny.
Oh man, see now you're making me like the guy.
Well, he's very prosperity. So you can like some of his ideas, but the way he lives his life is questionable.
Yeah, I'll tell you that. I mean, I was making the observation not too long ago, just how bizarre it is that the flight industry is so appealing to men of that orientation. It's the most bizarre thing. It's like half the...
You're talking about pilots, flight attendants? What part?
Flight attendants.
Flight attendants?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, almost all the flight attendants, at least from my experience, I flew a lot in my life. and it was basically always that orientation. I don't know what it is about being a flight attendant that appeals to. I don't know. Who knows?
I have no idea. I don't know. Well, there's like an appeal, I guess, if you're looking to just make friends in places and then not have to worry about maintaining those friendships.
That's a good point. Yeah, and that kind of
you can kind of keep
loose ties.
Yeah.
You know, see the world, get out, not be tied down. Because I once made the observation that orientation is also always the one to leave the small town and go to the big city.
Oh yeah,
right. Like they're always
there's more people. Like if you're trying to.
And there's I think there's a shame built in too, that they don't want to be around people that truly know them.
Yeah.
Right.
Or they want to hide whatever it is about their life that is shameful in their mind.
Right. Yeah.
I do think that if you have a shame to hide, you're more likely to go to a place where you can hide amongst people.
Yep.
Because if you're alone in the forest, you're alone with your shame and your thoughts.
Oh yeah. No. The shameful man doesn't go to the woods.
No.
No, that's certainly true. Shameful man goes to the noisiest place he can find.
Yeah, absolutely. That is definitely. I feel like when you go to, this is a weird segue, but when you go and do your confession reconciliation with your priest, it almost always feels better to go out into the world and kind of be alone a little bit.
Yeah.
Because you're free from that, whatever it is you've just given away.
Yeah, I mean, that's also why I've always loved face-to-face confession. I never, I came into a traditional Catholic community that just kind of encouraged that. So to me, I never understood the screen confession. It's so nice to just have a regular confessor, someone that knows you, and you sit down face-to-face and go, okay, here's what happened this week and whatever. And I mean, there's a piece to that. There's a peace in your soul, and like you said, you walk out, and you don't feel like you're hiding. You feel like you're just out there. But also, talking about silence. If your soul's not, so I remember when I was coming up on my relapse. Obviously, I didn't realize I was coming up on a relapse, but when I was coming up on my relapse 5 years ago, whatever it was, 5 years ago now, I think, there was this bubbling energy, and there was a lot to that relapse that I never spoke about publicly. There was a lot of, let's say, excuses that I think people would have gone, oh, like that makes way more sense. But I didn't want to come out and just go right into excuse mode. I just wanted to own it and just take the brunt of the shame.
Victimhood does no
that's it. You know what I mean? Like, I could give you the medication they had me on, because I had got my 4 wisdom teeth taken out. I've never said this publicly, but the medication that they put me on was an experimental medication that had just been allowed, and it was pulled like 3 months later because a study showed that it lowered people's inhibitions. So women that were on it were like going up to bars and like married women, sleeping guys, like crazy stuff.
Jeez.
They pulled the medication off the market. That's what they had me on. And so there was like that already was one thing. And then I watched that night before my relapse, I watched Shia LaBeouf's Honey Boy, and it just flooded me with the worst childhood memories. And then here's what's crazy. So I'm kind of wigging out, and I can feel myself wigging out. And I texted a friend of mine, and I said, dude, I'm wigging out right now. I'm in crazy pain, and I'm on these goofy pain meds, and I just watched the worst possible movie for my own psychotic. Like, it was, the whole movie is just my own trauma, right? And so I texted my friend, and I was like, I just need something to distract me. Do you have any good documentaries? Like something that's real conspiracy theory that I can just focus my mind on. And it's the funniest thing. Me and him still joke about this. This was this tipping of the scale. He sent me The Fall of the Cabal, which, considering my childhood trauma, and of course I'm in a bonkers mindset, and he doesn't know,
Okay.
So that's what he sent me, and I put that on, and it was just like, bloop, blinked out. I mean, it was just
barely remember a thing after.
Barely remember that. My mind was just gone after that. I was just bonkers zone. But anyways, so as I was coming up to that relapse, there's this weird energy. It's a shamefulness, but you don't even know what it is. Because at that point, I didn't know what wasn't being reconciled properly, right? I didn't want to know that the career and the faith, that there wasn't a compatibility between the two. And so I'm avoiding it. And I think that's what happens with any sin, right? Is that the more you're trying to turn away from it and not see it, the more that angst starts to build, and you just kind of want to hide. You stop being around people that know you, and it's a bizarre thing that happens. And I think it's just
it's like pride in reverse.
Yeah.
Your shame gets so great that you feel like you can't be around people.
Yeah.
And it just builds and builds and builds, and eventually you get so isolated that the devil can get you to do whatever he wants.
That's it. I mean, I think that's a big part of it. And what's interesting is if you're living a single life and it's easy to disappear into a large city.
Yeah.
Because that shame isn't picked on in the anonymity.
And nobody's counting on you.
Right. Nobody's counting on you. No responsibilities. Yeah. That's a
responsibilities are definitely a good way to get yourself out of that mode.
Yeah. Yeah. No, the responsibility. Who was it?
That's why kids need responsibilities.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the only way to mature, and this was Bishop Fulton Sheen, the only way to mature is pain and responsibility.
Yeah.
Pain and responsibility matures you. And it's true. I mean, it's I'll talk to young guys that aren't married, and they've got all these strong opinions, and I always kind of chuckle and go, hey, get married, once you hit like 4 kids, like, let's just see where you stand on things. What you think I can't just
kids will tell
I can't just know because well, no, maybe your mind works real well, but maturity goes a long way for shaking out how principles work.
Oh yeah, it does.
And that maturity, it's true. You don't mature. I mean, I matured late. I got married late. I matured late. But the person I was before I got married, and I would have told you, I'm a mature guy. I've been working since I was 8 years old, and I was on my own from the time I was 10. And but the reality was, I didn't even start maturing until maybe a tiny bit when I first got sober, 15 years ago or whatever. But no, more than that. Whew. But
what advice would you give to a Gen Z guy? Like, would you say go and find a mentor, or maybe not a mentor, but like an example of what you want to be? Or
I'm working on my last video. I had said in the video that I released, where I said I wasn't going to be doing public stuff anymore, and I was going to do a couple more interviews. I also mentioned that I want to do one kind of bullet point video on, like, if you're a young man, here's a path that you can follow from A to Z, step by step. And it's been more difficult because it's the old adage of, like, how do you gain prudence? How does a man who is not prudent gain prudence? And the reality is, St. Thomas says, you can only gain prudence by following a prudent man. That's the only virtue that you cannot just gain on your own. How would you, right?
Yeah.
The problem is, I'm not really convinced I'm not really convinced that it's possible to spot who that is today. Right? They certainly exist. It would be absurd to say there are no great men. There are absolutely great men. The problem is, it's really hard to sift those out. Right? When you start looking at the statistics, I mean, I don't know why. Maybe for some reason, because of who I am or because of how I speak, or I don't know why. A lot of guys come to me with their problems. It's just a bizarre thing. And I always tell them the same thing. I'm no one to come to with problems. I don't give advice. I have a very strict no advice policy.
Okay. I was not aware of that, so I apologize.
No, I have a strict no advice policy. I'm going to kind of break that rule when I release this video, but my point is, people will come.
But I think you're speaking from experience with that, aren't you?
Well, no,
to a degree.
My spiritual director wasn't real big on advice.
Okay.
He was real big on the kind of Socratic approach of, like, helping me. Like, here's the principle. How does it apply? Work through it. right? You've got to figure it out. I'll sometimes say, well, I've done this or I've done that. Here's my experience. I'll do that. I'll say, here's the principles. I do know moral principles very, very well. It was part of my early Catholic training, and it was very robust, so I can humbly say I know most of the moral principles very well. But I won't just say, well, here's what you should do.
Yeah.
I think that's always, I think that's always a bad idea.
We're not going to have a.
No, it's Andrew.
As you say, you're not going to have the Bug Hall's 12 rules for life.
No. The video I'm going to make is basically going to be, drop out of school, start smoking pipes, and go buy some raw land and build a house. I mean, it's going to be how do you get out of this society but still live a life that's abundantly meaningful, right?
Yeah.
And it's just going to be a step-by-step kind of thing, and hopefully it'll be helpful to some people. But I want to get all the minutia, about the video right. But yeah, if you were, I don't know. It's like I said, I don't know who you talk to, right? Because these guys, they come to me with their problems, and these are guys that are like all Catholic guys, and we're talking about guys that are married, they've got lots of kids, and they're pillars in the community, and then they come to me with these secrets, and it's like, man, like, you don't want to be talking to anybody nowadays. Like, you just don't know who's who. The world is such a pitfall. So I don't know, man. I really don't. I think young men.
I would say definitely more prayer, though.
Prayer, yeah, prayer.
I don't think prayer can ever hurt you.
No, I mean, that's my biggest thing is prayer. I think the only reason I've survived is prayer. I was always radical about that. My spiritual director was not easy. I was praying the office very early on. I never gave it up. The rosary. We actually struggled with the rosary for a lot of years. I was more consistent with the office than I was with the rosary. But
rosary is hard because you have to put effort in to really get something out of the rosary. I feel like.
Yeah, well,
you can't just drone on like Hail Mary for it,
right?
Or
right.
If you're doing it in Latin, either way. But if you're just droning on through it, you're getting nothing out of it.
Yeah,
you gotta actually meditate while you're doing the prayers that you're supposed to.
What's funny is I think the hardest part for us with the rosary was just that, with the office, it's kind of built in. Right, yeah. Like you wake up, you pray.
Rosary, you got to find a time to do it.
Right, matins and lauds. Evening time. You've got vespers and compline. You've got your minor hours. There's a structure to it. The rosary, it's like when you do it, you keep putting it off. Yeah. And then next thing you know, it's like bedtime, and you're like, oh, you got to get the rosary in, and then you don't pray it very well, and you feel bad about that, and you're like, man, I waited to the last minute. So we struggled. We got the rosary down now, though. It took,
It's about scheduling your prayer too.
Yeah. And I think that was a big part of it too. Was, right around the time that I was thinking about leaving LA was when we started really, really nailing our rosaries. But it took a long time, and especially when you get married, it's hard because all of a sudden 2 lives come together. And it's like, no, this is my schedule. This is how I do things. And trying to, you can demand all you want, but another person's sensibilities and personality, it's not a matter of authority and disobedience. It's a matter of like, what's conducive to her good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Okay, well, if I'm praying this way at this time or whatever, that doesn't include her.
Right.
I've got to figure out how to make that work. That's something they don't teach you about marriage is if you're doing it right, it's still really hard.
Yeah.
Because you have to be doing what's best for her.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just a matter of, hey, welcome to my world, honey. I pray my rosaries at 6 a.m. to make sure I don't miss out on them. You better get up and get up. It's like, it just doesn't work that way.
No, it doesn't.
But yeah, so I don't know. I think young men today have a brutal world ahead of them. I think they just have a brutal world ahead of them. I don't think they have any great, really, there's no apparent great leaders. Nobody taught them anything. The world really is, as much as the victim mentality is no good, the world really is truly against them. That's just a fact. I mean, it's like Christianity and then young men. Those are the two hated categories.
But the red pill is not the answer.
Well, that's the problem, is it's not. But the red pill is like communism.
Yeah, it looks nice on the outside.
Well, there were a lot of early commentators, Chesterton and Belloc, guys who kept trying to be reasonable. They kept saying the communists, the reason they're gaining traction is because they're right about all the problems.
They're just wrong about the answer.
They're wrong about the answer.
Yeah.
But the problems so they say the problems, and that's what the red pill does. The red pill is, women are going to divorce you, and they're going to take your kids, and they're going to take your money. Yeah. Yeah. I watched an interview with, some Catholic commentator, real kind of sharp, well put together kind of guy, speaks very well. And he was talking to this young girl who's like half his age. And it was a debate about the pros and cons of marriage. And he was supposed to be the one debating that young men just need to get married. And she was making the argument like it's just not beneficial anymore. The danger to them is so high, right?
I think I know exactly which one you're talking about.
It's like a redheaded girl.
Yeah,
she's nasty, but
she's right about some things.
And here's the problem. The problem was he looked like a retard. I don't know if I can say that on.
It's fine.
He
wouldn't concede any of her points.
Right. He was just like, well, life's dangerous. Toughen up. It's like, well, hold on.
I know. Exactly
hold on. You get married, right? Now, if you're a young man, we all have this built-in desire.
Yes.
You get married. You have children. This is your progeny. This is the most important natural thing you'll ever do. And then she takes those children. She weaponizes the court against you. She most likely lies and says you did this, that, and the other, right? And so she turns your social circle against you, right? This happens all the time. And now I know so many men whose children have been ripped away from them, and they are shells. They are non-functioning shells. They never recovered. They're bat crazy. And they are just broken men. These young men that hasn't happened to, they see that too.
Oh yeah.
They see it because they're in tune to seeing it. Because that's what is a very high likelihood in their future. And so the answer is not to say, oh, well, life's dangerous.
Just get married. Yeah.
Just get married. And he goes, well, in Latin mass communities, it's only a 10% chance. Wait. You're saying in the best case scenario,
there's still a 10%.
I have a 1 in 10 chance of getting married and having my life completely destroyed. And if I'm a faithful Catholic, I know I can't get married again. I know the annulment is nonsense. I know it's just paper shuffling nowadays. But deep in my heart, I would know that I'm married. We all consented to these vows, and we upheld all the requirements for a valid marriage.
There are very few reasons for a real annulment.
Right. And so as a young man, I go, okay, so if I'm going to be true to my faith, I know that I can never get married again. Right? So I'm living like a hermit now.
Yep.
I'm not going to get access to my kids.
Yep.
Right? And even if I do...
Because the government's going to keep them away from you.
Yep. And even if I do, I'm going to have to play this horrible game where both parties are trying to weaponize the kids against the other. And I can either just recuse myself and not be part of their lives, or I'm going to be drawn,
put in jail.
Right? And it's like, you're going to pretend that's just a reasonable risk. Because quite frankly,
no-fault divorce was one of the biggest mistakes this country ever made.
Oh, it is a horror. I've spoken to so many young men who rightfully see that horror, and so. And this is the problem, is they feel betrayed, right? Because this guy that was making the arguments, he's supposed to be the one on their side. And instead it's this nasty redhead girl that doesn't really represent them. And they're like, she sees it.
She sees it, but she's offering the red pill.
She's offering the red pill. And that's the problem is, man.
And it's really weird to have the red pill offered from a woman.
Right.
That's really strange.
It's super bizarre. But by the way, they're all just psychologically just broken people. Right? Oh, yeah. I mean, that guy in Ukraine with his brother that's supposed to be the big shot in the red pill community, like he's a crazy person.
He is.
I mean, forget moral degeneracy and everything else. He's legitimately crazy. Now, I do think there's answers, though. The problem is,
men have to really discern marriage.
They have to really discern marriage. They have to learn to seek out what's good.
Yes.
And the problem is they don't know how to do that. No one's taught them how to do that. One of the biggest problems that I see is, and they're hearing it from the red pill side, right? Is like, it's attractiveness. And I used to have Catholics arguing this to me. I used to argue this before I got married. I'd say, when you're seeking a wife, if the first thing that drew you is the attractiveness, there's already a problem. There's already a problem.
Yeah.
If it's not someone that you just, that you knew and there was a social, and you saw that there was some compatibility, and then the problem is women are inclined to hide who they are in the early stages of a relationship, right?
That's what they've been taught.
That's
Society
what they've been
teaches them.
That's what they've been taught to do, right? Put the best.
Men
foot
have
forward.
also been taught to lie as well, but in different ways,
right? And so, I mean, it's
really
a mess.
Being honest is the most important thing you can do.
Yeah. Now, I have one thing that I think is a great life hack. So, first of all, it's a myth. It's an absolute myth that a prenuptial agreement nullifies a marriage. That's a complete myth. There were marriage contracts all through Catholic history. It's just a marriage contract.
Right.
The problem is, if the language in the contract insinuates that divorce is an acceptable reality, then that could infer some.
It plants a seed at the beginning of the marriage.
Right.
To have that.
But here's the thing. This is the point I've been making. I think a very simple contract going into marriage would actually nullify the legal system.
Yeah.
And the simple contract is basically this. Look, neither of us believe that divorce is real.
My wife and I don't believe in divorce.
Right. So look, put it on paper. Neither of us believe divorce is real. If one of us should change their mind and file for divorce, they're automatically agreeing to receiving nothing that was owned in common. They leave with the clothes on their back, and they're relinquishing all rights to the children, right? If both parties entered into that contract, how many divorces do you think there would be?
Very few.
Very few.
Very few.
Because no one's going to want to be the one to file.
Right.
Whoever files gets nothing. They walk out with the clothes on their back. They relinquish their rights to custody of the children.
It would definitely make them work harder at the marriage.
That is the magic contract right there. And by the way, most women would enter into that contract
because they would not go into a marriage hoping that it's going to fail.
Right.
Who would do that? Why would you do that?
And then the problem is when things get hard, because just statistically, it's mostly women that file for divorce.
Yeah, lately anyways.
Yeah, it's mostly women. Everything in our society encourages them to file for divorce. They're incentivized 10 different ways, right? I know a Latin Mass Catholic married a girl who runs a orphanage in Africa, Catholic, she's as Catholic as it looks on paper. And, postpartum depression after the first kid, didn't like the lifestyle, didn't like the, whatever. All of a sudden, 1 year into it, she says she's going for a walk. She gets on an airplane, flies to Texas with her family, takes the kid. This poor guy's, it's been 7 years now. And
oh my goodness.
And he's just fighting to, see his daughter, every few months. You know what I mean?
And instead of the government trying to keep people together, the government's actively pulling people apart.
Oh yeah. And
The
you're
court system
incentivized.
does it. Yeah.
And you're incentivized to lie, right?
The lawyers are too.
She went into court, and of course she lied. He did this, he did that, and this. All admitted to lying years later.
Yeah.
But now that the courts are all done with the custody stuff and all of that,
Doesn't matter.
Nobody cares. The courts are, this isn't the 50s where, some judges looks at me like, wait, 4 years ago you lied that he did this and he did that? What a horrible person you must be to do that. Nowadays they're like, oh, well, those things happen, but, it's years later. We're not going to upend the decision.
Plus it would cost you your entire livelihood to go back.
Right. But here's the thing. The line between good and evil runs down the center of every human heart.
Yeah.
Right? When people are incentivized and encouraged to commit these grave acts, then all it takes is that one straw that breaks the camel's back. There's the breakdown, and then there's the justification. And for most people, and this is the scary thing about the people in hell, for most of those people in hell, there were these little windows where if they were just encouraged to not make that decision, but once they do, you got to justify it. And then you're spiritually scrambling to spend the rest of your life justifying that one horrible choice, right? Because we very often think about it like, how can one mortal sin, send you to hell? Well, because you commit that mortal sin and you can't face the thing. You can't face it. You've got to justify it. So now think about this. If that young woman had that contract in place, she would have likely gone for that walk and thought about, well, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
So if I file, I'm screwed. I get nothing. I leave with the clothes on my back. I'm never going to see my daughter again. Now what happens? She spends a few days overcoming her emotions for a minute, right?
And maybe goes and gets help, whatever she
goes and gets help. Most of the time, it's temporary.
Yeah.
Very temporary.
But then she makes a permanent decision in the other scenario.
And then she has to justify that forever.
Yep.
Right? So it's a tragedy. It's also why, like with my eviction thing, I made a huge mistake not having a contract with those people. Not just for my own sake, but I put them in an occasion of grave sin by not having a contract. Because when push came to shove and there was the slightest temptation, they had nothing holding them back. Right? So I have to own up to that responsibility. I have to own up to that and go, wait a minute. We should always be helping our brothers and sisters in whatever way we can.
Right.
Encouraging, whether it be by contract or by, social shame or whatever. We should always be encouraging our brothers and sisters towards the best thing. So that contract, I think I talked to a marriage lawyer who reached out to me on the internet, and he was like, that's a great idea. It could totally work. He said there's some nuances that you would have to build into the contract to make sure that it's legally binding. Like you would have to very explicitly explain what psychological state you're in, because he said they could, portray it as you being crazy or something. But basically, he said it's a pretty airtight if you get it right. And no one's going to file for divorce. That'd be the end of divorce. That'd be the end of it.
You would have very rare ones.
Yeah.
And they'd have to be absolutely horrible marriages.
Right. And that's the thing is, in those situations, you could look at it and go, well, that might be
the church does.
That might be one of the occasions where
living apart in the areas where things are very bad.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
but,
of course.
Yeah, especially if it's endangering children or somebody's about to kill somebody else.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But separation is not a divorce.
Right, and separation can very often be temporary.
Right.
The goal is reconciliation and a normalized life. So, using separation as a tool.
I just want people to know that, the church doesn't support if you're being abused and you need to leave for a little while.
Right.
The church is all about, separate for a little bit, but you need to reconcile the marriage at some point.
Right. No, one of the big problems today is that
no one works hard at it.
Even in good Catholic communities, people don't understand how almost nothing justifies divorce.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
The church has always encouraged separation when there's genuine danger, but basically nothing justifies divorce.
I mean, you say till death do us part.
Right. And the thing is, but it always comes back down to personal happiness.
It does.
But being separated, how would I ever be happy? That's not fair to me. Oh well. I know a guy that his wife left him. This guy's 60 years old. His wife left him, took the daughter. There's another story. This guy was like way back in the early days of no fault divorce. He's got a great relationship with his daughter now. She's a bit kooky, you know, but that
does happen a lot of times.
He lived a celibate life, and even though his ex-wife went and got remarried, you know, he knew that they were married,
right?
And he was like, "Yeah, I got the short end of the stick here. I didn't ask for this, but I'm not going to add sin."
Right.
I'm not going to go out and think that I'm justified in sinning just because I got a raw deal. And I mean, that man probably earned his way to heaven. You know,
dealing with that situation,
dealing with upholding his marriage vows, right? So look, we don't get to pick our sacrifices most of the time.
No.
And that's what that's what people have to understand. We don't get to pick our sacrifices most of the time. Now, that doesn't mean we should just run headlong into the worst possible scenarios.
No.
You know, prudence, real prudence means, the best sort of spiritual situation. You should be trying to pick the best wife you can.
Face the challenges that God gives you. Don't go looking
for
the challenge.
Right.
Those
and
are
that's
2 different things.
And that's the thing is like, but once those come, God's always asking something of you.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows? That man, that 60-year-old that lived there, and he's a holy man. I mean, he is just he's one of the holiest lay people I know. God very possibly might have seen all realities and said, "This is the only one where he makes it to heaven."
Yeah.
Right.
Look what Job went through.
Yeah. Yeah. So when we have hardships in life, I'm just getting to the point after many, many years. I'm just getting to the point where there's a joy in it, real joy. Not manic. Everything's fine. God wants this.
The dog sitting in the fire and the
right,
leaves, yeah.
Right. There's a real joy now because deep in my bones, I know that there's something in it that God wants from me. Some defect that I'm going to overcome, or some virtue I'm going to strengthen that is wavering. Maybe I might not know what it is exactly, but very often now you also get in tune to just seeing what it is, just plainly seeing it and going, "Oh, yep, I see what that is. Okay, I got you. I'll suffer that. I'll give you that aspect of it because I know exactly what you're asking for." And there's a joy in that. The strange thing about atheists is that they, even though they know God exists, they're living outside of that constant knowledge of His presence. I mean, that's just what a saint is, right? A saint is someone who's overcome their defects, but they're also just always conscious of God's presence. Always.
And a lot of times the devil attacks them harder.
Right, but can you imagine, like, there's that constant knowledge of His presence? What's neat, though, is when you learn to suffer, when you learn to see God in the circumstantial suffering, well, the joy that comes from that is realizing that God is always molding you. What an interest. The God of creation, right? The God that created all things. What an interest He has in you to be gently molding you into something. How? I mean, that just boggles the mind. And then it brings all this joy, of course, right? Because the God of the universe is interested in me. He wants something from me. He wants to make me into something. If that doesn't bring you the most possible joy that you could ever experience in this life, right, without being in the beatific vision,
right?
Like, that's so joyful. You start to understand why the saints are joyful. You start to understand why they're so joyful in their suffering. So I remember when I first converted, I was so drawn to the idea of the joy that the saints had in their sufferings, right?
Yeah.
It's appealing, but I never understood it. And only now, after 12 years, am I starting to just barely scratch the surface of understanding it.
Yeah, I mean, I remember you and I both talked. Fasting is very difficult.
Yeah.
And it's hard to put yourself through that voluntarily.
Right.
And all these saints did it joyfully, and they'd almost like shrug at you if you're like, I can't fast. Like, okay, I've been fasting for 7 straight days. What do you want me to do for you?
Yeah.
Or they'll even they'd have handed you their bread. Like, I don't need this. Go ahead, eat.
No, it's
And then they go a whole day with that. It's like, oh my goodness. I know some people that can fast like it's nobody's business, and they don't tell anybody.
Yeah.
They just do it, humbly. And
yeah, that's a big one.
it's hard to do it.
When I'm talking privately with young men, I always tell them the two things: consistent, organized prayer life and fasting. I mean, fasting was huge. There was a dramatic shift. When I look back in hindsight, there was a dramatic shift from pre-fasting to post-fasting. When I started taking that seriously, there was a dramatic shift. And there's these graces that start to come that I don't think can come from anywhere else. I don't know where else they would come from. It's so beneficial. It's sad that the church, in at least in its more public expression of things, has just given up so much of the most beneficial aspects of Catholicism. Right, the cross, all the things that made saints, and now it's a strange thing that we don't promote that stuff so adamantly, because that's the only place that real joy is. You can get the emotional experience that feels like joy in the happy, clappy, more charismatic kind of approach.
Right.
The problem is it's not sustainable. Right? It's just, now maybe dispositionally it's sustainable. Maybe you're just naturally a bubbly person, and those feelings.
There are people that have just charismatic tendencies.
Right, and those feelings are just gonna remain. But it's not the same as that unshakable joy that's found in the cross. It really is. It's so unshakable. People very often kind of joke with me that I'm just kind of unmoved by stuff. Yeah, and at a certain point, when you love your cross, when you love our Lord, you love the cross, and you've spent time there. At a certain point, just nothing moves you anymore. Everything's going to happen however it happens, and God's just right there, and you have no control over it anyway.
Yeah, that is absolutely something people can't seem to get a grasp on. Is at the end of the day, the amount of things you have control over is minuscule. And even the things you think you have control over, you probably don't.
Oh, yeah. You learn that with kids.
Yeah.
Those little people are little people.
Yeah.
I talk to my wife about that all the time. I don't remember, they're little people. It's great to have good, robust boundaries in our home, but each one of them is just wildly different. They're all little people. Now, we have no control over that aspect of them. We can tell them what's good and teach them what's good and right and true and beautiful and just, but they're gonna be who they're gonna be. That's just a fact. There's no change in that. Our job is to just put the parameters on the true and the good and the beautiful, and teach them, educate them, but they're gonna be just whoever they are. And I think that's a big part when people get too controlling. They want to control every little thing, and they imagine. So much of the control that we seek is actually just us building false images in our mind. Right? We just create these expectations because we create an image of something. Create an image of your kid all grown up a certain way, and then all of a sudden, next thing you know, you're just desperately trying to make them that because you had the image in your mind, right?
I'm just picturing your image of God molding, and it's like you're trying to say, no, I want to mold them this way.
Right.
But the Creator has.
That's it.
Not us.
We have no control, and it's so peaceful when you realize that. It's peaceful when you just, I just want to be good, and I have control over that. My kids, they're learning to have control over that. I talked to my third daughter. She's got a mild chromosome disorder, and so she really struggles with her emotions in a way that none of my other kids ever had. So it was like real shocking to us. And so we just talk about that all the time. You do have control of this. Just have to control it. And if you control it quickly, you control yourself quickly, then it's a lot easier. If you let it go on for 20 seconds, 30 seconds, you hit this point of no return. And even at her age, she gets it. She's like, I know, Dad, I know. I forgot to ask my guardian angel to help me. And then once I started, I just couldn't stop. I'm like, I get it, but and she, it's so neat. Kids understand things way more than I think most people give them credit for. I talk to my kids like they're the way I talk to adults. Other than guarding their innocence, right? I guard their innocence very robustly. But as far as contextualizing principles and understanding themselves, like they understand everything. My third daughter, I don't know how old she is, 3 or 4, and she, I know, yep, yeah. I once I started crying, I was kind of making it up, but then I couldn't stop because it just got out of my emotions got out of control. And she'll just talk to you plainly like that, and she just gets it. Go, yeah, well, got to get it quick. Get in there quick. Wait, stop.
Yeah.
And she goes, that's the way to do it. Yeah, I'll stop it fast, and then it doesn't even build. But I got to ask my guardian angel, because when I forget, then I can't do it. Yeah, good. It's awesome. There's nothing more naturally gratifying than being a parent. And when you combine that with the supernatural aspect of getting them to heaven, it's,
that is the biggest thing fathers are judged on, is their stewardship of the children, as well as their marriage and their wife.
Yeah.
And the goal is to get the whole family to heaven, right?
Yep. Yeah. No, it's, I forget which saint it was. There was some saint that said, if your children are damned, there's a very high likelihood that you're damned too. I'm always encouraged by hard sayings. I like that. That's just, hey, give me the parameters. Okay. All right. Children are damned. I'm probably going to be damned too. All right, cool. I can work with that.
So now you're like, all right, kids.
All right.
We got to work at this.
I know what my job is. Yeah. Good. It's funny because my wife has anxiety. Everyone nowadays has anxiety. I don't have it. I never had anxiety other than like weird. I have a couple weird fears, like zipping my manhood in my zipper.
That's scary.
Or umbrellas, like poking my eye out in a crowd of umbrellas. Like a couple weird things that have just persisted my whole life. Aside from that, I have no anxiety.
I don't like the deep ocean.
Yeah, I can see that one. But when you first get in the ocean, like when you're way out and you can't see the shore and you just get off a boat into the ocean, it's a bizarre feeling.
You are not the apex predator in the ocean.
No.
Just flat out.
There are lots of things. There are lots of things that don't even want to eat you, and they could just eat you,
or just kill you anyway.
Yeah, just kill you for fun.
Kill people all the time.
Oh yeah. It's just funny. But so my wife's got a little bit of anxiety. She's because she just came out of that generation where just everybody has anxiety, which I think is partially because nobody knows how to do anything. So deep down, there's this constant fear, like if any little thing goes wrong in my life, I'm not going to be able to solve it, right? Because I can't do anything. And so you're just living in this constant state of anxiety. But, oh man, we got sidetracked with zippers and deep water, and I forgot the point I was making there. But
sorry.
No, it was
stewardship, bringing the family to heaven.
Oh yeah, so hard sayings. It's funny because it took me time to learn that when I say something like that to my wife, it has this opposite effect.
It hits her different.
Yeah. And we've worked on that because I need to speak plainly. As a man, with a certain disposition, I need to be able to speak plainly, because if I'm trying to tap dance around stuff, I'm not going to say it very well.
No.
And so we've learned, I've taught her, and I think this is something most people would be better off learning to overcome rather than being accommodated, is learning to hear the thing and apply it positively. Right? Okay, if my children are damned, I'm probably damned too. You can go, oh no, what's the point of anything? Or you can go, hey, that's a good parameter. I see what my job is then. I see what I need to focus on.
Right.
That's a good goal. It suddenly became really bizarre to me a few years into being Catholic, or a few years into being publicly Catholic and talking online, how many people were losing their minds when I would just state basic principles. Like, well, people have scruples. You can't just say stuff like that. What? What do you mean? Get over it.
Right.
Like, just, focus on the good. Focus on, there's got to be some disconnect going on if everything you hear that has a negative connotation is bad.
Yeah.
Because if it has a negative connotation,
because we've given up the idea of hell.
Right. Yeah.
Nobody wants hell to be a real thing.
Right. Yeah.
And that's definitely more on the Protestant side than the Catholic side, but it creeps in.
Right.
It just does. That definitely strikes me the same way I think it strikes you. It's like you can either try and shift it, or you can accept it and go after it.
Yeah, I mean, I came into the faith, thanks be to God, through a crowd of people who were just very plain of speech. And so I got to learn so many of the principles, so many moral principles, just through that idea that, no, give it to me. I'll figure out how to apply it. I think that's the other thing too, though, is a lot of people, because there's a lack of maturity, they don't know how to apply something once they've learned it.
Yeah.
And that's scary. Right? So they're always wanting someone to just always tell them exactly what to do.
That's an easy trap to fall into, especially as a young man.
Right. Whereas I was always the opposite. I would hear something and go, okay, I get that. I get that that's the principle. How does that apply? What can I, and you work with it. You know what I mean? I've never been afraid of that. I've never been afraid of just taking a principle and figuring out how to apply it. The poverty thing was a good example of that. Everyone thought you're crazy. It doesn't even make sense. You can't even do that. Yeah, you can. You just got to experiment with it and fail and try to apply it and go, okay, that doesn't apply well this way, and just be willing to fail.
There's definitely a huge difference between setting a boundary and living in a police state.
Right.
And I think a lot of parents fall into the trap of putting their kids in a police state.
Yep.
And what happens when you live in a police state? Kids want to escape.
Yeah. Well, so I hear that all the time online.
Are completely different.
When I talk about how, because we're a very discipline oriented family.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Right. I discipline my children. I've gotten all kinds of backlash because I try to speak publicly and plainly.
Yep.
Partially because when I was speaking publicly and plainly, before I nuked my public interaction, what I realized is there's a lot of subjects that people are just afraid to talk about.
Yeah.
And I figured, you know what? I'm uncancelable anyway. There needs to be someone out there saying, okay, it's good to spank your kids. Right? Because no one wants to say that. I mean, there's states, I think I just broke the law in the state I'm in, because you can't even, in the state I'm in right now, that's actually against the law.
Is it actually?
Oh, yeah.
I actually have no idea.
It is, yeah. So, so I got a bunch of backlash for that, but we're a disciplinary family. But here's the thing. We keep a principle.
We make everything that could be taken to an extreme illegal.
Right.
Because there's a huge difference between abusing a child and disciplining.
Right. And this is that goes back to the principle: abuse does not negate use.
Right.
Just because someone abuses a principle doesn't mean you should outlaw it for everyone else. But so we're a disciplinary family. But here's the thing: I'm always working with my wife. Funny enough, she's more inclined to this problem than me. I'm always working with her on, we only make rules that are necessary.
Yeah.
We don't have a whole bunch of rules in my house. Like if my kids want to climb a tree and fall and break their arm, they're just allowed to do it.
And they'll learn.
And they'll just learn. Like there are very few rules in my house. Now the rules we have, you keep them. There is no wiggle room. And by the way, unless they explain themselves. Well, one of my favorite things about being a parent is I got in the habit of asking, why did you do that?
Yeah.
I never used to ask that. It was just like, you broke a rule. And one day I started realizing there's these little nuanced moments. So you go, well, why did you do that? One time my daughter, Bernadette, for like a year we called her Bernadette Foreheady, because she cut her bangs. She had her just all the way off, right? And I was trying to figure out, my instinct was, okay, everyone's in trouble. Everyone's in trouble for this. What's going on? And so she's crying. I'm like, eh. She was like 2. And then my daughter, Therese, she said, well, Daddy, it was me. I did it. I said, you're going to be in big trouble. And I thought about it. I said, well, hold on. Why did you do it? She goes, well, she was going to cut her hair, and I couldn't stop her. So I figured I'm going to do a better job than she will. So if she's going to cut her hair, I just figured I should be the one that does it. I realized she was trying to save her in a really stupid little kid way.
Yeah.
There was genuinely an altruistic, and I went, yeah.
How are you going to argue with that?
Yeah, I said, okay. I said, so you
try to do a good thing.
You knew that she was going to butcher her hair, and so you tried to convince her to let you do it because you thought, I'm going to do it better, and Mom and Dad won't be as mad about it. All right. Kids are stupid. That's just fine. So there's a lot of stuff like that, but yeah, not being too strict, because I hear it all the time online. People are like, oh yeah, you're strict. Well, your kids are all gonna leave home and they're gonna never leave.
No, boundaries are good. Kids need boundaries.
They love boundaries.
Because
what they don't like is tyranny.
Yes.
Right. What they don't like is tyranny, and the problem is, in the weird world we live in, where we live in this amoral world.
Yeah.
You either have nothing or you have tyranny. Yeah. And that's the only thing anyone knows. They don't understand what loving discipline looks like.
Absolutely.
Right? Because like even in terms of corporal punishment, I've never once in 8 years, 7 years, I guess, my eldest are 7. In 7 years, I've never once disciplined in anger. Not one time. That's a miracle of grace, first of all. Because I'm very irascible. I'm an angry person. I've never once disciplined in anger. Because it's not educational.
Anger will take you beyond what you intend to do.
Right. Well, it's going to be disproportionate, but also it's not going to educate them.
Right.
Right. When we're afraid, not afraid in the filial way,
right.
Like, well, I've disappointed my father. Afraid in the like shivering. What happens is you can't reason anymore.
You cut it out.
You cut it. It's all blocked out. So you don't learn anything. But when people think of discipline, corporal discipline, they only think of anger. They can't think of a very calm, here's what's going to happen. I want you to accept your punishment. And I want you to ask for the grace. If you offer this punishment up, you can ask for the grace to overcome this thing. And do you understand what you did wrong? Yeah, okay. Now the punishment's coming. I'm sorry. You're forgiven. Still going to be punished. Here we go. You ready? Okay, here it comes. Boom. Oh, done. And then they go, oh, okay. And like right back to life, And it's amazing how, when you see it firsthand, I think it's just a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing to see them, especially when they get to the point where they go, I accept my punishment. I know what I did wrong, and I do need to be punished. My eldest daughter, which she doesn't even get spankings anymore, we usually cut spankings off around 6 or 7, depending on 5, 6, 7, depending on the kid. I think my eldest daughter, she was basically done with spankings by almost 6.
There's definitely a line to be drawn with each form of discipline, depending on children.
Right, depending on the child.
Absolutely.
She basically outgrew spankings, because you got to remember, and this is what the church always taught. This is what psychology even says. The point of a spanking is that your kid doesn't have the full use of reason yet.
Right. So they have to be taught in a way that they understand.
Right, and so all you're doing is creating a cogitative association with wrong behavior. That's all you're doing.
This behavior will lead to some kind of punishment, some kind of consequence.
It leads to something bad. This is bad. That's it, right?
Yeah.
Now, once they gain full use of reason, you start shifting punishment towards, withholding something, or they're grounded, or, things that are more in that realm. But it was really beautiful. I kind of knew my eldest daughter was growing out of spankings when she would come and confess things. Like, Dad, I did this. I would say, oh, well, what do you think should happen? I have to have a spanking. Yeah.
It is a mature thing to realize, I did this, I deserve punishment.
Right. And the irony is that use of reason made me realize, okay, she's outgrowing things. So then you go, okay, that's fine. You know what I'm going to do instead, though? You know, your Sunday treat, because we always, if they're good at math, they get a treat. No Sunday treats after Mass this Sunday. You know,
And then you kind of also know you can start kind of consulting your priest about whether the child is ready for confession reconciliation.
right. Well, that was with her. That was none of my kids have reached that point yet, except for her. But we knew at 5, she received communion at 5 because she was full use of reason, habitual use of reason.
Yeah.
And so I just went to my priest and I said, and this is, I mean, it really should be. You know, we live in a bizarre time where even the church has turned into this bureaucratic nightmare.
Yeah.
And it's like, I went to my priest and I was like, hey, Josephina's ready to receive communion. Okay. Bring her by. I'll talk to her for a couple minutes. He literally talked to her for 2 minutes and was like, okay, yeah, I agree with you. Let's set up a day. That's it. That's how the Father knows, you know.
Yeah, there's like this famous story that Pope Pius X, a child went up for communion, way too young according to like whatever rule was. And he said, no, bring the child by. He can have communion. He's ready.
Yeah.
Like, wow.
Yep.
So,
and it really is, again, this goes back to people being afraid to apply principles. It's like people want to be told what the exact age is.
Yeah.
And they want it to be standardized so they don't have to think.
Yep.
They want it to be standardized so that they don't have to be the one responsible to actually know their children. Like my second daughter, she's probably not going to receive communion until she's like 8. Realistically, she just has a different kind of brain, a different mind, and she might surprise me. It might be a little earlier, but realistically, I don't think it's going to be before she's 8 or so. And I'm watching, but you know, they're all different.
Yep. I think that's the biggest thing you can learn as a parent is your children are all going to be very different. But
yeah,
speaking of children, I believe mine have returned.
And mine are actually probably ready for bed because it is, almost bedtime. So
I don't want to keep you here too long, so you can get back to them. And
well, this has been nice. This has been good.
Has been.
Yeah, I'm glad we did this. I'm especially glad we did it in person. The last few interviews that I do, I want to do them in person. There's just something different.
You're in the room. You can look at each other in the face.
It's a different kind of conversation. It used to be unheard of, the remote interview thing, and then almost overnight it became the standard. But the last few that I do are going to be in person like this because they're just better conversations.
They are.
Well, thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
You got a beautiful home, beautiful
Thank
Catholic
you very
home.
much. Just everybody's listening on audio just got a real nice taste of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, seriously, thank you for coming out.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Very good.
It's been very nice.
Very good. You sign off any certain way or?
Oh, good call. Yeah. Thank you for watching the Crash Canon podcast. If you want to know more about Bug, he's got a couple other videos he's put out, and he's going to probably put out at least one more. It sounds like
one more. Yep. My unsolicited advice to young men.
And anyways, if you want to know more about him, go find his channel, and I'm sure you could find some movies he's been in.
They're out there. There's a couple of them.
But if you like this, then subscribe. And I'm going to try to do a couple more of these. We'll see how they go, these in-person interviews. And go from there. And I want to shout out our mutual friend, his construction company.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Seeger Construction. He's awesome, man. He's a gem of a man. I'll tell you, he'd be a great guest on here.
I do want to get him on, so I'm gonna make sure that he knows you said that.
Yeah, he'd be a great guest because you got to get him on. I think it's neat because I've gone the complete other way as far as like leave the world. He's trying to take the approach of like, okay, I'm in the world. I got to be in the world. He's got a construction business, general contracting, but he's trying to do it as Catholic as he can.
Yeah.
You know, down to fair pricing. I mean, it's that's got to be hard all in and of itself, is to price things so fair when you know you can gouge people at a time when like the trades are all falling off the cliff.
Yeah.
And you can just gouge people, and then hiring Catholics, paying a fair wage. It's inspiring to see men who are trying to apply the principles and really radically applying the principles even at their own natural detriment.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? He's a gem of a man. I love him dearly. I love him. I've learned a lot from him too. That's I've been working for him up here while I'm trying to bridge the gap on fixing up my house here and getting it sold, so I can go permanently home to Arkansas. But it's been kind of fun learning all these little tricks.
Yeah. Learn a lot in construction.
Yeah, well, and his is different because it's, everything I've built, it's just you just kind of make it up as you go along. I know how to use tools. I know how materials work, right?
Right.
But his is like really technical because it's all codes, and you can't put the plug socket here, or it's got to be like this, and it's like a lot of knowledge that that I think is silly, but it's so applicable. Now if I ever have to go help somebody, I won't have to say, hey, just so you know, I don't have any idea what I'm doing. I'll be able to say, well, I think the code here is that it's got to be like this.
Yeah.
So that's neat.
But definitely shout out to Caleb.
Yeah, shout out to Caleb, my brother.
All right, well, this is